The final item of business is members' business debate on motion 22984 in the name of Jamie Green on the intensive care unit at Inverclyde Royal Hospital. And this debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Jamie Green to open the debate for around 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I thank members who signed my motion to bring this to the Chamber today? Save Our Hospital is one of those perennial but very powerful tools in our political toolkit. It strikes at the heart of communities. It's an emotive subject because hospitals are places of worry, of sorrow and joy, of illness and recovery, of life and death, the very essence of politics and public policy. Now, I accept from the outset that change is sometimes difficult to accept, understand or even communicate. Patient safety is, of course, paramount. But patient safety should not be a smokescreen to make unpopular changes, which are instead the byproduct of systemic problems of resource, finance or governance. There is nobody in Inverclyde or Renfrewshire, North Ayrshire or even Argyll who does not have an Inverclyde Royal Hospital story to share. It is a truly ominous building, but it's one that sat at the heart of our community since the year before I was born. I was a youth volunteer at the hospital radio station in my teens. I had a weekly show there, the highlight of which was a Christmas Day request show. I'm not sure really we had many listeners, but I do remember one year the phone rang in the studio. I nearly fell off my chair. So it seems serendipitous that one day that same hospital would serve as a place of care and love for so many of my friends and family, some of whom walked proudly back out of its front door, others who sadly didn't. And I too have spent many a night in the ICU family room, sleeping on its uncomfortable floor, the kind nurses bringing me cups of sugary tea. And you don't always remember the names of folk in those situations, but you never forget their faces. The strength of feeling locally to protect the intensive care unit for all patients who need it, for as long as they need it, is not just palpable, but entirely justified. Because on the 1st of October this year, shocked staff were told that level 3 ICU patients would be moved to Glasgow. And although that type of care had been under threat for much longer than that, because in December of last year, the government confirmed in writing that its 2 funded level 3 care beds were already at risk. And it said that challenges and risks existed which might impact its ongoing sustainability. But guess what those risks and challenges were? It will come as no surprise to this chamber. Workforce and skills shortages. And that was a year ago. It's there in black and white. And then COVID came along and temporary changes were made to patient pathways. People get that. I get that. But Inverclyde was hit hard by COVID, with a death rate twice the national average. People understood temporary changes in response to a temporary health emergency. But what they don't appreciate is that being used as a cover to make permanent changes. The rumours weren't just rumours. Patients, before the very eyes of staff, were being stabilised in Greenock and moved to Glasgow. And in response to reports of these substantive changes, the Greenock Telegraph launched an online petition, which has received over 11,000 signatures. Protecting the ICU at Inverclyde has united Inverclyde. It has brought together residents, staff and politicians of all political colours. Even local businesses have got on board too. McGill's buses printed the campaign message on the back of their bus tickets. And political parties condemned this move. One local SNP councillor said, I quote, "It is a disgraceful decision in the midst of a global pandemic." I don't disagree. Another councillor pleaded, local people need to speak loudly by sending a clear message to our political leaders in Holyrood. And normally those people would be in the gallery behind us. But I know they're watching online, so let me tell them directly, you have spoken loudly. And I hope our message is crystal clear to our political leaders today. Now, of course, the NHS board responded quickly, saying that the ICU is not closing, but it did admit that level 3 patients are indeed being transferred to the Queen Elizabeth in Glasgow, a mantra repeated by the Health Secretary and one perhaps we will hear again today. A change made under the proviso of COVID with no guarantee of reversion to pre-pandemic pathways, a guarantee we are today seeking. We know that the NHS is operating under unusual times. It is operating under a state of emergency until March 2021 at least. But presumably that means post-COVID, we can expect pre-COVID provisions of care. Now, this ICU has proven its value. It currently admits around 1,450 patients per year, but this new pathway will move 100 of those patients, at the very least, to Glasgow. 100, not just a number, that's 100 people and 100 families, already in despair in their darkest moments, having the added worry of stress of how to make that trip to Glasgow from Greenock, often twice daily, and as I know far too well, so far away when things go wrong in the middle of the night. It is simply disingenuous to claim that there is nothing to see here, that nothing has changed, and this is just a case of poor communication. It is not. The fact remains that historically, level 3 care patients were not just stabilised in Greenock, they were treated there too. It remains a fact that patients who required intrusive ventilation were given it there, or multidisciplinary support was given it there. I know that because, like thousands of others, I've seen it with my own eyes. And we've been offered a jargon-filled briefing in defence. The beds are there and the staff are there, so the ICU must still be there. Fine. If that be so, then why are patients being put into ambulances and transferred to Glasgow, when this time last year they were not? If that does not constitute a major change, then what does? It cannot be ICU by name alone. And if the issue is resource, then that is a legacy this government must take responsibility for, because there are gaps in consultancy, gaps in anaesthetics, gaps in middle-grade nurses, and the use of locums is rocketing. This unit has been chronically under-resourced for years. Services have been chipped away. The ENT unit, the GP out-of-hours service, the orthopaedic unit, the physical disability rehabilitation unit, the maternity unit, the list goes on and on. These aren't perceived threats, they're actual threats. So here, in closing, are our questions to the government and the Health Board today on behalf of those people back in Inverclyde. That in the middle of this pandemic, why on earth are we reducing ICU care, not beefing it up in our local hospital? Why is Inverclyde being putting into restrictions because of fears of ICU bed capacity in Glasgow when we have a hospital right here on our doorstep? Why is there no guarantees that these temporary changes are just that? And what is the long-term plan and vision for this hospital in 5 or 10 years? How can we have confidence that this hospital lies at the very heart of providing cradle-to-grave health for the people it serves? It's time to end the obfuscation. Give this hospital what it needs. Give the staff the reassurances they deserve, and give the people of Inverclyde the respect of some much-needed honesty in this debate, because they all deserve nothing less.
We'll move now to the open debate. Can I remind all those who wish to speak to please make sure they've pressed the request to speak buttons. And I call, first of all, Stuart McMillan to be followed by Maurice Corrie. Around 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, first of all, I congratulate Jamie Green for securing this important debate. As Mr Green indicated in his comments to the Greenock Telegraph yesterday, the situation has evolved since the motion was submitted. Presiding Officer, the first point I want to highlight is my frustration with the Health Board. I've said it publicly before, but also to the Health Board staff directly. The communication about this process, about this change, was nothing short of a disgrace. Staff being told with 24 hours notice of a change, there's no way to run any service. It certainly showed a disregard for local staff and also for Inverclyde, so I fully understand and support the comments from my constituents as they expressed their anger. Presiding Officer, both Mr Green and myself have raised the ICU in this chamber, and I did it directly with the First Minister, as you'll be very much aware. And Presiding Officer, also I would like to put a couple of undeniable facts on the record just in this particular debate. The campaign, first of all, the campaign that was being run was adamant that the ICU was closing. It isn't. The beds are still there, being used, the staff are there, and patients are still going to the ICU. Level 1 and Level 2 intensive care remains at the IRH. The issue is that of Level 3 intensive care, which Mr Green touched upon. Now, I want that fully returned to the Inverclyde Royal Hospital. I actually would like more services at the hospital, and I will come on to that point in a few moments. Now, I've spoken to various health staff at the hospital, both formally and also informally, and it's clear that there is a variety of opinions as to this decision that was taken and also the care that the patient will get. But ultimately, the patient should be the uppermost person in the minds of everyone who cares about this issue and also about others regarding the IRH. Now, I would like the Level 3 care to once again be fully delivered at the IRH, and I would like that to happen as quickly as possible. And Mr Green touched upon the state of emergency process up until the spring of 2021. Now, the Health Board will provide many reasons as to why there are challenges to local provision, and these need to be fully understood and solutions put in place to try to deal with them. However, staffing is always raised as an issue, and quite frankly, the public of Inverclyde don't always accept that reason. The Health Board regularly state that the IRH has a long-term future, and I do agree with them on that point. However, the one issue that would put that beyond any doubt is for the Health Board to build a replacement for the Inverclyde Royal Hospital. A replacement removes any accusations that the hospital is going to close and that it is going to be downgraded. Now, locally, I have yet to meet anyone who thinks the building of the hospital and its location on the top of a hill with no shelter, totally exposed to all the elements, was a good idea. No wonder the building has had so many problems with water ingress over the years. Now, I do welcome the investment that actually has went into the hospital, and these facilities, including the new theatre, will be put to good use. However, unless a new build hospital progresses, debates like this today and across Inverclyde will continue for many years to come. Now, in some quarters, there's a belief that the Health Board don't consider Inverclyde as a priority, and I don't share that view. We now have Orchard View Hospital, which was the replacement for Ravenscraig Hospital, and also the new Greenock Health Centre is under construction. These two projects alone will provide better health outcomes for patients and also provide better working conditions for staff. And I know that certainly from a family perspective. One of my aunts was a patient at Orchard View and previously at Ravenscraig Hospital. Saying also the continual claims that services are going and that the hospital is shutting will do nothing to entice people to want to work at the IRH. Now, who would want to work in a hospital if they thought it was going to shut? That this is yet another reason why a new build hospital is important. It could help deal with some of the recruitment issues the Health Board continually highlight. Now, finally, Presiding Officer, the public perception is one where we need to travel elsewhere for some services. Not one person has raised this as a concern when it comes to specialist services. However, for services that are considered as more routine, then it does frustrate many of my constituents. My constituency is one of the oldest population shares across Scotland, and under the SIMD index, we now have some of the most deprived data zones in the country, including the highest data zone in the country. My community has many underlying health conditions, many of them as a result of the previous working conditions. The Health Board obviously understand most of this, but with the investment in the two new facilities I just mentioned, but they can fully understand it by committing to a new build, leading to improved recruitment and also resulting in making it easier for services to be delivered locally as compared to asking my constituents to travel elsewhere for routine services. Thank you very much.
Maurice Corrie, please, followed by Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I'm too pleased to speak in this debate and thank my colleague Jamie Green for taking this issue, a very important issue, forward on behalf of his constituents in the Inverclyde area, which also is part of our joint West Scotland region. Inverclyde, previously Scotland's hardest COVID-hit region, has undoubtedly been heavily impacted through the pandemic. The first wave saw a high death toll, leaving it inevitably dubbed Scotland's COVID capital. Currently, the area sits at level 3, having made a marked improvement with cases currently being more stabilised. In response to these challenges, continued localised clinical provision has been vital for the community. And indeed, the Inverclyde Royal Hospital has served local people through the years well, and covering an expansive area across Greenock, Dunoon, Cowell, Largs, Gourock and Port Glasgow, altogether serving a population of 125,000 people. The intensive care unit staffed by a dedicated team provide the highest quality of critical care, and I am aware that many families have a deep appreciation, as has been stated by Stuart McMillan just now and his family, for the treatment their loved ones have received, and therefore any changes to how this critical care is to be provided must be communicated clearly and sensitively, especially as COVID cases continue. Indeed, every health board holds the responsibility to clearly communicate any changes to the delivery of services with transparency and openness. In failing to do so in this case, the Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board's previously unclear messaging regarding critical care at the IRH is causing distress, frustration and tangible concern across Inverclyde, which is certainly regrettable. A 2018 Audit Scotland report highlighted the need for greater engagement and collaborative decision-making in how health and social care services are delivered. It makes the point that any changes must be implemented in a way that involves local communities from the start, which I am sure would help to allay understandable concerns and encourage discussion. I recognise and appreciate the steps taken by the Health Minister to seek assurances from the Health Board that the ICU in Inverclyde would not in fact be closing. Indeed, clarity on this point from the Health Board was sorely needed from the outset. And furthermore, I'm relieved to hear that local patients requiring critical care will, in most cases, continue to receive treatment at the unit, but that is only those requiring the most specialist care will be transferred to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But post-COVID pandemic, they should return to Inverclyde for their continued specialist care and also, very importantly, to be near their families. Research has shown that almost a third of COVID-19 patients who require ventilation are also in need of renal support, which regrettably has not been available at the IRH for some time. And this raises concerns that services at the IRH will continue to be reduced or downgraded, which I sincerely hope will not be the case. Of course, these are unprecedented times, Presiding Officer, and the strain on health and social care provision has been enormous, especially when we head into winter. And therefore, I do recognise that in response to this burden, changes to clinical pathways may have to be taken. Yet, while the Health Board has advised that this particular change may only affect a small minority of patients, the decision suggests that the Inverclyde Royal Hospital is undergoing a further reduction in service to local people. The debate raises a bigger question for the need of greater investment in the Inverclyde area. And to conclude, Deputy Presiding Officer, this latest change contributes to the concerns that Inverclyde is not receiving the investment it needs, especially in these difficult times. Local people deserve greater provision, and this includes a renewed emphasis on not only securing but expanding health and care services at the Inverclyde Royal Hospital. Thank you.
And the last of the open debate contributions is from Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This is an important debate and I welcome the opportunity to speak in it and to make the case for local services at Inverclyde Royal Hospital. This hospital has served the communities of Greenock, Gourock, Port Glasgow, Kilmacombe and many others well through the years. As has been said, Inverclyde sadly has the highest COVID death rate in Scotland. Inverclyde is also home to the most deprived community in Scotland. We should be investing in services in Inverclyde, not removing services out of Inverclyde. For many residents in Inverclyde and beyond, it feels that the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde is particularly wedded to the policy of centralisation. That is despite profound community concern that the hospital will be left behind, concerned that the views of patients, families and local residents will be ignored, concerned that previous moves to centralised services such as out-of-hours primary care and birthing suites indicate a pattern of behaviour, concerned that staff are treated as an afterthought, and concern about the geography of Inverclyde and the reliance on coastal transport links that can be subject to flooding, weather-related disruption and congestion. According to Transport Scotland, the M8 between Renfrewshire and Glasgow is the most congested section of motorway in the country. But while people travelling from elsewhere in the city have access to a number of alternative routes, those travelling from Inverclyde are limited. For all those reasons, there is deep anxiety in the community about the extraction of any services from the IRH, let alone intensive care beds. The failure of the Scottish Government to understand that anxiety or to intervene and set the Health Board on a different path is increasingly met with frustration and distrust. These specific decisions to relocate ICU beds have been taken without any meaningful consultation at all with the local community. A worker at the hospital has told me that staff aren't even clear what the deciding factor was in deciding to reduce ICU services. They also want to know what the contingency plans are for the emergency department, given the increased pressures from the lack of ICU services. As has been said, the public have made their feelings known. Over 11,000 people have signed a petition calling for the ICU in Inverclyde to be safeguarded. The Health Board's communications, even with senior councillors and the Integrated Joint Board in Inverclyde, have been appalling. The leader of the council, Stephen McCabe, could not have been clearer when he said, "The boards say they are committed to the IRH, but the bottom line is people no longer believe them." There is a real sense of betrayal in Inverclyde too. It wasn't all that long ago that the Scottish Government promised to keep health local. They said there would be a presumption against centralisation. Prior to the last election, the First Minister came to the West and took to the front page of the Greenock Telegraph to promise that there were no plans to centralise services out of Inverclyde. And only a few weeks ago, the Health Secretary gave an assurance that the Scottish Government was totally committed to the IRH. Totally committed. Yet not only are services under continued threat, I have obtained information under Freedom of Information, figures showing that the total repair backlog at the IRH now stands at an eye-watering £100 million and counting. I have to say to the Scottish Government that is a strange way of showing you're totally committed to a hospital. When the people of Inverclyde are faced with constant threats of cuts and closures, the removal of ICU beds without consultation, and a repair backlog that keeps getting worse, then surely even government ministers in Edinburgh can understand why they feel forgotten and left behind. I want to pay tribute to NHS staff who have been going above and beyond throughout the COVID crisis. It's important that people we depend on to care for us have a safe, modern, working environment and certainty about the future of the services they provide. It doesn't matter if they're working in a big city hospital or at hospitals like the IRH in the West. Every part of the country should be getting a fair deal. A fair deal for the West of Scotland means investments in our hospitals and a complete rethink of the centralisation agenda. If the Scottish Government and Health Board really are committed to hospitals like the IRH, then they should prove it by investing in the IRH and keeping health services local.
I now ask Claire Hawkey to respond to the debate. Please, Minister, for around 7 minutes. Minister, we're not hearing you. If you could hold on till we ask broadcasting to have a wee chat. Meanwhile, I know that Mr Green seemed absolutely desperate to be saying something a moment ago, so I can ask him. You can have a minute while we sort this out, Mr Green.
You're very kind. It's an unusual precedent, which I hope nobody follows in members' debates. But given the nature of the new virtual proceedings, it is very difficult to intervene on a government minister on a formal response, and we don't have summing up opportunities. But I do want to stress upon the Minister, I will listen carefully with respectful intent to what she says in the debate, but we have posed very specific questions and raised some very specific concerns, and I do hope that they're answered. And if they're not answered in the debate today, we will be writing as members further to her on those questions.
That's not a precedent I was setting, may I add, and it really is for the ministers to respond to these things. Minister, let's see if we can hear you now. Nope, we can't. Would anybody else like a wee minute just to jump in? No. Third time lucky. Try again. Oh, a very nice living room you have there. Emma Harper would like to make a little contribution. This is definitely not a precedent, may I say. Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've listened to this debate with great interest, because in Dumfries and Galloway we also have issues where care is being moved to other centres. And I have a question for the Health Secretary tomorrow, actually, about cancer patients going to Edinburgh and bypassing the Beatson at Glasgow, which adds an additional 2 hours of journey time, which isn't really optimal. But I do have concerns about how we are going to look at what are the issues around it all, and obviously staffing is a concern, and I am concerned that we don't have enough ICU spaces for the level 3 care that is required. So I'll be happy to hear the Minister's response.
I'd be quite happy to hear the Minister at the moment as well. Then Maurice Corrie.
Deputy Presiding Officer, I hope it's not a precedent, but yeah, I've been highly involved with the Vale of Leven hospital over in Alexandria, in my area, and one of the lessons we've learned is to keep up the pressure on any campaign, and therefore I think it's important that and this reflects to the residents of Inverclyde, is you need to keep things going, and eventually we can get progress with it, because it's important that we deliver our services in our localities for the best of the residents there, and important that they're always served near their families and the care is delivered there. Thank you.
Neil Bibby.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. In addition to the £100 million repair backlog at the IRH, there's also a £76 million repair backlog at the REH in Paisley, a £15 million repair backlog at the Vale of Leven in Dumbarton, and a £30 million backlog at the Crosshouse Hospital in Ayrshire. All these hospitals serve the West of Scotland, and I think it's only right that we have a fair deal for hospitals in the West of Scotland, a significant investment, not just in new big city hospitals, but hospitals that serve the communities of West of Scotland.
Can I just say two things? First of all, if I'd known this was happening, I would have been armed with all the figures for Hairmyres Hospital in East Kilbride.
Suggesting we suspend.
Yeah, and also that, well, three things now. It would of course be impossible or indeed not expected for the Minister to respond to all these additional points that were made there. We're still not managing to get Clare Hockey back. So can I suggest we suspend for a couple of minutes and see if IT can get her. So this meeting is now suspended.
Grand. I'm ready whenever you are.
The meeting is reconvened. Can I ask Clare Hockey to respond to the members' debate about the ICU at Inverclyde Royal Hospital for around 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. My apologies for the technical difficulties there. I welcome the opportunity to respond to this members' debate on behalf of the Government, and I want to start by being completely clear, contrary to what is stated in Mr Green's motion, that the 2 ICU beds at Inverclyde Royal Hospital remain open and there are no plans to close them. The Chief Executive of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde has given the Health Secretary an absolute assurance about that. I'm sure all members would agree that the quality of care and patient safety must be of paramount importance, and these principles underpin what is happening in Inverclyde. The Health Board are formalising the clinical pathway which ensures that the most seriously unwell local patients can access the specialist services and support that they need. And this is referred to as level 3 critical care, such as the provision of support for multiple organ failure, and involves the transfer of a small number of such patients to Glasgow. This was already happening on an ad hoc basis during the COVID-19 pandemic, with a small number of local patients transferred to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital under the pathway from March this year. The board has nonetheless been clear that the 2 ICU beds at the IRH will remain open. Patients will continue to be locally assessed and will not bypass the hospital. Those patients that require level 3 will be stabilised and, if necessary, receive invasive ventilation before being transferred. As such, critical care services at the IRH, comprising the ICU, high dependency and coronary care units, will continue to stabilise or treat local patients with a range of complications such as diabetes, sepsis, pneumonia, exacerbations of asthma, heart attacks or other cardiac conditions. The changes in the clinical pathway reflect the best evidence about the quality of care and outcomes. For example, we have learned that around 30% of COVID-19 patients who require ventilation also require renal support. This has not been available to ICU patients at the IRH for a number of years, and patients who therefore require such highly specialised care will be transferred to Glasgow following admission and stabilisation at the IRH. Contrary to the tabled motion, this change is therefore about ensuring that local patients who are most acutely ill, including as a result of COVID-19, can receive the very best treatment and care. However, that does not mean that all critically ill COVID-19 patients from Inverclyde are being transferred. We've learned from the initial wave of COVID-19 that many patients benefit from non-invasive ventilation in a high dependency unit setting. As such, Greater Glasgow and Clyde have increased capacity to offer this on the IRH site and have made new appointments in respiratory medicine to support its delivery. Indeed, the board anticipates that this should reduce the number of patients who ultimately require transfer for specialist support. And the Health Board have been clear that the IRH critical care team will continue to provide treatment for local patients, including those admitted to the 2 ICU beds. This includes those who do not require to be transferred or for whom transfer would not be clinically appropriate. For those patients that are transferred to Glasgow for specialist treatment, once they improve and no longer need the level 3 support, they will be assessed for transfer back to the IRH for their continued recovery and rehabilitation. It's also important to appreciate this change in context. The IRH Critical Care Service currently admits approximately 1,450 patients per year, and the Health Board estimates that the number of most unwell local patients that will need to stabilise and transfer under this pathway is approximately 100. That equates to less than 7% of the total critical care admissions each year. So the overwhelming majority of local people who require critical care will continue to be treated at the IRH, while the most unwell receive the specialist care they need in Glasgow. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde have further assured the Health Secretary that local staffing and all other IRH services, including surgery and the A&E department, will be unaffected. And it should be noted and respected that this change, predicated as it is on maintaining the quality and safety of patient care, has the full backing of local clinicians. That said, I would agree that this small but important change to the patient pathway should have been better communicated by the NHS Board. This would have clearly helped to allay the level of local concern expressed in early October. Members can be assured that this has been raised with the Board and they accept the criticism. I know that the local elected representatives were fully briefed on the issue by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde on the 8th of October, and the Board issued a media release the same day to further clarify the position. None of this should be news to Mr Green, as the Health Secretary wrote to him on the 30th of October, setting out the same detail I have provided today. Nonetheless, I want to conclude by reiterating this Government's commitment to ensuring that, wherever possible and appropriate, health boards and their planning partners fulfil their obligations to meaningfully engage with local communities about any proposed changes to their services. I'm clear that this change is being informed by the emerging clinical evidence about how best to treat the most critically ill patients, not least those with COVID-19. As a result of the pandemic, NHS boards are currently operating under a state of emergency, and that will run until at least the end of next March. This is not business as usual. Operational changes that are required to ensure that patients are safely and effectively treated during this time cannot be subject to the levels of public engagement and formal consultation which are ordinarily required for obvious reasons. That said, members can be assured that any proposals for the permanent changes of services would have to be considered in the normal way, including those surrounding major service change and ministerial approval following the conclusion of the current state of emergency. Finally, Presiding Officer, I would want to assure local people about the key role the IRH will continue to play in the delivery of their healthcare services. For the avoidance of any doubt, both the Scottish Government and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde have been consistently clear about our commitment to the continued provision of comprehensive hospital, community and primary care services across Inverclyde, including those provided at the IRH. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate and this meeting is closed.